The White House calls Operation Epic Fury a success. But 4 weeks in, the Pentagon is asking Congress for an emergency $200 billion to cover the damage. So what has this war actually cost so far? The heaviest price. As of late March 2026, the Pentagon has confirmed 13 U.S. service members killed and around 290 wounded. The single deadliest moment happened on March 1st, when an Iranian drone got through U.S. air defenses and hit an operations center at a port in Kuwait. 6 Army reservists were killed. On the same day, a soldier was severely wounded in a separate attack in Saudi Arabia. He ultimately died from his injuries 7 days later on March 8th. 6 more were lost on March 12th. The crew of a refueling aircraft that went down in western Iraq. Of the 290 wounded, most returned to duty, but at least 10 are still in serious condition with shrapnel wounds, burns, and brain injuries. Getting them out of the region is a problem in itself. The aircraft used for medical evacuations are slow and vulnerable, and escorting them pulls fighter jets away from active missions. Aircraft. 3 F-15 fighter jets were lost, not to Iran, but to friendly fire. On the night of March 1st, all 3 were shot down over Kuwait. All 6 crew members ejected and survived, but 3 jets worth around $90 million each were gone. The F-15 is one of the primary aircraft the U.S. uses to hit targets deep inside of Iran. Fast, long-range, and capable of carrying a large weapons load. It turned out a Kuwait Fa-18 Hornet fired on all 3 of them with air-to-air missiles in quick succession. The official explanation is misidentification. The pilot apparently mistook the F-15s for enemy aircraft during the chaos of an active Iranian drone attack. But that explanation has raised serious questions among defense analysts and former fighter pilots. An F-15 is a large aircraft. The Kuwait pilot was close enough to see it visually, and the same mistake was made 3 times in a row. Several experts have publicly said that's very difficult to explain as a simple accident. The investigation is still ongoing, and no definitive conclusion has been reached. Between 11 and 12 MQ-9 Reaper drones have been lost, most shot down over Iran, though some were destroyed on the ground by Iranian strikes on air bases. They're doing double duty, providing the persistent surveillance that finds targets, but also striking them directly with Hellfire missiles. They fly continuously over Iranian territory, watching for things like mobile missile launchers, troop movements, and targets that need to be hit quickly before they move. Each one costs around $30 million, putting the total loss above $330 million. Iran has been bringing them down using air defenses, but also by electronically cutting their satellite control signals, causing them to fall out of the sky. There's also evidence Iran has been using a weapon built specifically to hunt down slow-moving drones. Losing this many in under a month means the US is increasingly flying blind over Iranian territory, and missing targets it would otherwise catch. An F-35 also made an emergency landing after taking damage on a mission over Iran, with the pilot treated for shrapnel wounds. The F-35 is the most advanced stealth fighter the US has, used for the most dangerous missions where getting past enemy air defenses undetected matters most. If Iran genuinely hit one, it would be the first time an F-35 has ever been damaged in combat anywhere in the world. Analysts think Iran tracked it using heat sensors rather than radar, which the stealth technology doesn't protect against. 5 refueling tankers were damaged at a base in Saudi Arabia alone, and at least 7 US tanker aircraft have been damaged or lost in total. The KC-135 Stratotanker is the primary refueling aircraft used in this operation, and it's irreplaceable at any price. Most of these aircraft were built in the 1950s and 60s and have never been fully replaced. Every tanker out of action shortens the leash on the entire air campaign. The warning systems. This is probably the most damaging loss and the one that gets the least attention. Iran has specifically targeted the radar systems that detect incoming missiles before they arrive, and it worked. At least one of the radars that powers the top tier of US missile defense has been confirmed destroyed, with strikes hitting several others across the region. These systems are what allowed the US to see a missile launch, track it where it's going, and get an interceptor in the air in time to stop it. Without them, the defense defense network has blind spots, warning times are shorter, and cheaper Iranian weapons have a better chance of getting through. Each radar costs between $500 million and $1 billion. Only around a dozen are believed to exist worldwide. There are no spares sitting in storage, and rebuilding production capacity would take years. To cover the gaps left behind, the US has had to pull identical radar systems from other parts of the world, including South Korea, leaving those regions less protected in the process. A long-range radar in Qatar used to detect missile launches from very far away was also hit, worth around $1.1 billion to replace. And the US Navy's headquarters in Bahrain took a direct strike that knocked out the communications equipment used to coordinate the entire naval operation in the Gulf, causing real disruption at a critical moment. Bases. Iran's approach to striking these installations was pretty simple but effective. First, send in waves of cheap drones to force the US to keep firing expensive interceptor missiles until the defenses start running thin. Then, once the coverage is weakened, hit with more precise ballistic missiles. In just the first 2 weeks, that strategy caused widespread physical damage to US bases across Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Qatar, and Jordan. Runways got cratered, fuel storage facilities caught fire, weapons depots and logistics hubs were damaged or destroyed. Iranian strikes were coming in relentless waves, meaning US-based personnel were essentially living under near constant alert for the entire duration of the conflict so far. Based on reports, no base was knocked completely out of action. The bill. The US was burning close to $900 million a day in the opening phase. By the end of the first 100 hours, the total was $3.7 billion. By day 6, it had reached $11.3 billion. By the end of week 4, estimates range well north of $25 billion. The Pentagon has now asked Congress for an emergency $200 billion, arriving while the US was already heading toward a nearly $2 trillion budget deficit this year before any war costs were factored in. A significant chunk of that spending is just on shooting down Iranian drones. Iran's drones cost around $35,000 each. The missiles the US fires to take them down cost between $4 million and $15 million per shot. In the first 100 hours alone, the US spent an estimated $1.2 billion just on interceptor missiles for defense, according to CSIS. And new top-tier interceptor missiles won't arrive in meaningful numbers for over a year. Iran doesn't need to win. It just needs to keep launching cheap drones until the US runs low on the missiles to stop them. The bigger problem. There's a longer-term issue that goes way beyond this war entirely. The weapons being consumed here. Long-range cruise missiles, interceptors, anti-ship weapons. These are the exact same ones the US would rely on if China ever moved on Taiwan. In the first few days alone, the US fired over 168 Tomahawk cruise missiles, while simultaneously burning through interceptor missiles at a rate that had defense analysts warning about stockpile depletion within weeks. The manufacturer only builds around 90 Tomahawks per year. Replacing just the opening days of this war would take years. And the 4 submarines that carry the most Tomahawks are already starting to retire, with nothing lined up to replace them. Military simulations have consistently found that the US would run out of these missiles within days in a serious conflict with China. This war is burning through those stockpiles right now, before any Pacific conflict has even started. China is watching every bit of it and taking notes. The US has hit Iran hard, but the cost in people, aircraft, radar system, bases, and weapons that takes years to replace is real, and some of it won't be fully recovered for the better part of a decade. Could this turn into World War III? That's what we cover in the video on your screen. Check it out. Thanks for watching.